Alright folks, this is Sultan. Over the last couple of days, we've seen tens of thousands of Gazans protest, but for a change, they were against Hamas. I'll try to show you some of these protest videos, but I might have to blur them out because for some reason, YouTube flags footage of poor Gazans speaking up against Hamas as violence. I don't know why they do that, and without indulging in conspiracy theories, all I can say is it beats me why YouTube won't allow these anti-Hamas protest videos. All of these people are chanting slogans against Hamas. Check out Ahmed Al-Khatib's video where he highlights the same point.
So I was just walking in Washington, D.C., and I'm thinking to myself, wow, finally we have a responsive pro-Palestine movement in the West that is actually representing the interests of the Palestinian people. Folks are out here all of a sudden to support the tens of thousands of people in the Gaza Strip protesting Hamas.
Countries of the world unite! Countries of the world unite! Sanction Israel, do what's right! Sanction Israel, do what's right!
Completely hopeless. There's absolutely no hope. Not a single mention of the thousands of the Palestinian people right now in Gaza who are protesting against Hamas, who are demanding the end of the group's terrorism, demanding the end of the group's tyrannical rule, demanding freedom, demanding the end of this disaster that has been unleashed upon our people.
Anyway, I'm noticing a disturbing trend from both sides vis-a-vis these protests. The so-called pro-Palestine crowd is awfully quiet. All of your usual pro-Palestine folks who are actually pro-Hamas have suddenly lost their voice. They're taken aback by this huge denunciation of Hamas by Gazans. And the pro-Israel people are casting aspersions on the veracity or genuineness of these protests, which is astonishingly mind-numbing. This is a great opportunity to show the world that in the West, these people are protesting for Hamas, but in Gaza, they are protesting against Hamas. Something must be seriously broken here. People like Mehdi Hasan, who spends 90% of his time criticizing Israel for bombing Gaza, on paper, he says he doesn't support Hamas. He claims he's only speaking up for the innocent women and children of Gaza who are being mercilessly bombed by Israel. In other words, he presents himself as a humanitarian, someone who cares about the suffering of the Palestinian people. Then surely you'd think he'd also give space to Gazans who are asking Hamas to release the hostages, saying they no longer want to be used as cannon fodder for Hamas's political goals. They don't want to sacrifice their children for the obsession of non-Palestinian Muslims who dream of wiping Israel off the map. I mean, if you genuinely care about Gazan suffering, wouldn't you listen to the people of Gaza as well? But instead, what we've seen is pin-drop silence from all these so-called pro-Palestine activists. Whether it's Mehdi Hasan, Linda Sarsour, Rashida Tlaib, or Islamic influencers like Muhammad Hijab and Dildo Boy Dilly Hussein, none of them has said a single word about the tens of thousands of Gazans protesting against Hamas. Why is that? I guess Piers Morgan's question, do you condemn Hamas, was absolutely relevant.
Do you support Hamas?
I'm not going to condemn anybody who's defending themselves, and I won't condemn my people who are the victims.
Did you condemn what they did on October the 7th?
I think a lot of what we saw about October the 7th was actually lies.
It exposed the hypocrisy of these so-called pro-Palestine activists. As we've been saying since the issue reignited, that these people don't care about Gazans. They care about their ideological goal of wiping Israel off the map. They're happy to keep sacrificing ordinary Gazans. In fact, they want Gazan blood to be shed to further their political ambitions. And I'm not the one saying that. The former Hamas chief, now dead, Ismail Haniyeh, said it himself. They want more Gazan blood.
كما قلت وفي كل مرة أكرر إن دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ لا أقول تستصرخكم بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة.
No Muslim leader or leftist ever condemned that statement because deep down they agree with it. So when we say that these people are not pro-Palestine but are actually pro-Hamas, we're not wrong.
So if it's wrong to kill civilians, were Hamas wrong to do what they did on October the 7th, given how many civilians were brutally murdered?
Are you doing the same thing to Emily?
Isn't it amazing? Muslims outside of Gaza love to say that they are willing to die for this cause, but they never go to Gaza.
We believe that life begins at death. We don't care about death. We love death.
They're not going to die for Gaza, but instead, they want ordinary Gazans to keep dying for this so-called cause. Luckily, many Gazans no longer want to sacrifice their children for the religious zealots and far-left ideologues sitting comfortably outside of Gaza. These clowns will sacrifice every single Gazan for the sake of their either religious fantasy or their leftist Marxist ideology. The hatred for Jews in Islam predates the modern Israel-Palestine conflict. Again, I'm not the one saying that. Muslims themselves say it.
أو كرهنا لليهود من منطلق عقيدة. القرآن هو اللي بيدعونا إن احنا نكرههم.
لو أن اليهود تركوا لنا فلسطين خلاص يبقوا حبايبنا؟ لا طبعا.
You see, even if this issue is resolved, even if Israel was wiped off the map, many of these people, according to their beliefs, would still hate the Jews. So can you really blame Israelis who don't trust them? Who don't want to agree to a two-state solution, let alone a one-state solution? This episode is undeniable proof that these people aren't pro-Palestine. They are pro-Hamas. They wholeheartedly support Hamas's tactics and its goal of wiping Israel off the map. But my concern doesn't end there. I've also seen some shocking comments from the Israeli side, and I'll try to address some of them one by one. But first, I want to rehash a quote I often return to from Golda Meir, who once said, "Peace will come when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us." I think there is profound wisdom in that quote. And I think anyone who doesn't like it probably doesn't understand Islam or how societies evolve. We want people to love their own lives and the lives of their loved ones more than they hate us. Because when people hate you more than they love their children, you're not safe either. What we're seeing now is Gazans showing that they don't want their children to die over this conflict. Sure, they may not be doing that out of love for the Jews, but that's not the requirement here. They're doing that because they want to live. That's why we should all support it, not reject it. Throughout history, people have had to dehumanize others in order to justify attacking them. This is what Hitler did when he exterminated Jews, Poles, Romas, Ukrainians, Russians, homosexuals, and so on. This is what Hamas and Islam do. They call Jews the worst of creations, apes, pigs, people who deserve to be humiliated, and so on. The dehumanizing of your enemy is always the first go-to step for every belligerent. So when Gazans themselves say no to that approach, albeit due to the extreme suffering dished out to them by Israeli bombing, which I think was necessary, it seems that a lot of Israelis are willing to sink their heads in the sand and not acknowledge these protests. They're showing all kinds of unwarranted skepticism towards the authenticity of these protests. For example, check out this tweet. "These are Hamas and other terrorists now unmasked to hopefully be united as protesting innocent civilians when the relocation movement begins in Gaza and slip through security and to avoid arrest and terrorism charges." Do you genuinely believe that every single person who is protesting thinks he's going to be captured on camera and use that as evidence that he's not associated with Hamas? It just cannot happen. There are literally tens of thousands of people protesting. And let me tell you, these protests have happened before, and we've seen how Hamas brutally crushed these people, even shot them at point-blank range. Were they also trying to show that they are anti-Hamas so they could be spared in some future hypothetical relocation? The risk of getting butchered by Hamas for attending these protests is far greater than the chance of being picked out of tens of thousands of people as a protester and being spared by Israel when they decide to relocate you. These tens of thousands of people are not captured by camera, but they have been observed by Hamas. And lo and behold, Hamas has already started killing these anti-Hamas protesters, like this 22-year-old protester, Uday Sadi. All those naysaying Israelis, congratulations, you're on the same side as Hamas. I'm sorry, this is a dumb tweet. It shows that this person and those who liked it simply want to keep seeing Gazans as who need to be eliminated. I'm sorry, that's never worked before, and it won't work this time either. Let me refer you back to Golda Meir's quote. We want people to act like this. We want these people to behave like this. These people are risking their lives by protesting against Hamas because they love their children more than they hate you. Someone said that, oh, they're all fighting age men. Where are the women? These people are risking their lives for the sake of the lives of their loved ones, including those women and children that you want to protest against Hamas out in the open. What a silly argument. I can't help but notice that Israelis are setting some really, really terrible double standards. It's easy for Israelis to say, why don't Gazans stand up against Hamas? It comes at an extreme cost. What's the point of standing up to Hamas for the sake of protecting your family when standing up to them could get you and your family killed? That's one of the reasons why most people don't stand up to Hamas. That's one of the reasons most Germans did not stand up to the Nazis and in the process became monsters themselves. But when they do stand up against all odds, you say it's not genuine? Make that make sense. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. There's some more silly tweets. A little late. They think this is fantasy land. These same people who protest are the same who kidnapped and infants at that. They need to get in those tunnels and free the hostages. Their only hope. F Gaza. Another one said, how many were wearing masks celebrating children's coffin not long ago? Hard to tell, isn't it? Imagine, no anti-Hamas protests until just now. That's just wrong. There have been many protests against Hamas, but they were brutally crushed by Hamas. It's the same people who celebrated the October 7th attack. We have no evidence confirming who did what. I've often quoted this survey that was taken immediately after the October 7th terrorist attack. It clearly shows 37% of Gazans called Hamas's decision to attack Israel a wrong decision. That means roughly 80,000 people. That's a big number. I get it. It makes your job easier to bomb Gazans without mercy because they're all the same. Confronting the reality that they're not all the same will make you question your merciless approach. By the way, I also don't see any other way than what Israel has taken. Israel has to keep targeting Hamas, and I also understand that Hamas will keep using Gazans as human shields, and ordinary Gazans, unfortunately, will keep dying. But you have to acknowledge that not all Gazans are the same. Just so you can sleep peacefully at night, you can't just turn around and say, well, they're all the same. I don't want to know anything else. But more importantly, I thought Jewish people, of all people, would understand how a system of oppression, hatred, and bigotry can turn even ordinarily good people into monsters. We saw many such examples during World War II. So many people who would have never harmed anyone were slowly corrupted by the brutal system of oppression created by Hitler. That's the same kind of system Hamas has created, supported by the Muslim diaspora and obviously the far-left wokies. And the victims of it aren't just Israelis, but also Gazans. And when they show you a little sign of understanding, you say, nope, I don't want to hear them. They're fake. I'm not saying that they are protesting because they have suddenly become fans of Gandhi's teachings of nonviolence. I'm saying these people have suffered so much that they are probably realizing that there is no point in going after a much stronger adversary and just dying in huge numbers. For me, that reason is good enough. That reason is good enough for Golda Meir. Let me ask you this. If Hitler had offered all those murdered Jews, all 6 million of them, the chance to leave the Third Reich because getting rid of them was too much hassle, but we still hate you, would they have taken that offer? Of course. I think every single one of them would have taken it. So you should accept that they might still hate you, but that's not a reason to keep bombing them. But if they don't want a war with you and still are not your biggest fans, that should be good enough. Pursuing anything else is futile because you can't get rid of them all. Now, I understand this doesn't change anything on the ground. Israel has military goals and objectives, and I think it will continue pursuing those goals. Unfortunately, a lot of Gazans are still going to die, despite so many of them saying that they don't want this war with Israel anymore. So why are you talking about it, Harris, if the argument is already redundant? Well, it's because the side that I'm on, I want them to stay on the right side of history. You acknowledging that there are Gazans pressuring their overlords to release the hostages out of self-preservation, not out of love for the Jews, will keep you on the right side of history. Your acknowledgement of this fact will show that you're on the higher moral ground and that you're not some bloodthirsty people who draw satisfaction from the blown up bodies of their enemies' children. Acknowledging the veracity of these protests isn't going to make you lose the war. There is zero net negative impact on Israeli objectives, but there is a huge positive impact because it could weaken Hamas to some degree. If you agree that it's Hamas's toxic ideology that is fostering or prolonging this conflict, then you also have to agree with those Gazans who are saying exactly the same thing. I'm sorry, I have not seen a single good argument from Israelis who are doubting these protests. Not a single good one. You can't get rid of every single Muslim. Nobody can. But if we can change the minds of those Muslims who want to destroy the West or Israel, then we all win.